Yeah. Welcome, everyone. I am Reagan from Corey Canine Massage. I am also a pet Reiki practitioner, and I am here with Heather Lacey, human Reiki practitioner, and we're here to answer your questions live. If you have any, just you please put them in the comments, and we'll get to them as we see them. But also, we have a number of questions people have sent us in advance. Yeah, so we're going to be answering those, over the space of a half hour, whatever. And Heather, please introduce yourself to all.
As Regan said, I'm Heather. My company is called Lazy Cat Oils. I deal with aromatherapy, Reiki, reflexology, so holistic modalities, holistic healthcare. I don't know what else I can say. I've been doing Reiki since 2005, 2006. That's when I did my training. So it's been a few years.
Yeah. Well, a great question to start out with is from Jillian, a friend of mine. How exactly does Reiki work, and why is it beneficial for pets and humans alike? I'm going to let you go ahead with the how Reiki works thing.
So we talked about this once before. Reiki is basically a transfer of energy. It's a conduit of energy. Everything is made up of energy. Everything around us is made up of energy. Every cell, every animate and inanimate object has an element of energy to it. And Reiki essentially is gathering that energy and transferring it, transmuting it to somebody else. And so it's kind of, you're not giving up your own energy.
Mm-hmm.
You're working as a conduit for
a channel.
A channel for the energy that's around you, and sending it to someone else so that they can use it to help heal themselves.
Right.
So, beneficial for pets, humans.
Like the benefits, I would say, as far as animals go, would be very similar and in most cases identical to humans. So the benefits for humans are physical and emotional. We talked about this a bit before. I'll let you go ahead, Heather.
So yeah, a lot of it is the energy is going to wherever it's needed within the person. Mm-hmm. And that energy is kind of being used by the body to help heal whatever needs to be healed. So it could be physical, but it also can be emotional. A lot of times with Reiki, I find it's an emotional, spiritual, physical, or
energetic,
mental kind of
yeah
healing process that happens. And yes, as a result, often physical, but there's that kind of emotional side of it that kind of hits pretty hard sometimes.
Yeah,
in terms of helping with that.
And getting to the chakra end of things, it's very good for balancing chakras, our natural main energy centers, exactly. from the bottom of us to the top, basically. Exactly. Correct? Yeah.
Yep. That's, as you said, the main energy sources for us are our main chakras. And like any energy source, they can get blocked, they can get stuck, they can get stopped. And using Reiki is a good way to help get them cleared, get them cleaned, get them moving again, so that energy is flowing through you and not getting stuck and stopped in a specific spot.
Yeah, yes, because it's not only physical movement or just our physical reality that affects how our state of being, but our energy as well. Correct? We need to be calibrated correctly.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Gord, another friend of mine, asked what are some of the similarities of Reiki for humans and pets, and if there are differences, what would they be? So just sort of bouncing off Jillian's question there, just to go a little further. Do you have anything to say first about the similarities and differences humans to pets?
I think one of the easiest differences would be kind of the actual physical treatment side of things. That kind of works a bit differently between humans and animals. I mean, you're still doing a treatment, but the
Mhm.
physical mechanisms for doing a treatment are a little different. Obviously, you can't have a conversation with
Yeah.
a pet to the same degree that you could have a conversation with a human being
Right.
about what's happening, about what may happen, about how they're feeling about stuff, all that kind of fun stuff, right? So,
Yeah, so basically what that means is rather than talking, although there is some animal communication involved when I'm in that space, I can talk about that later
yeah,
perhaps, but putting that aside, regular old language, English, I am speaking with the pet parent first as an introduction and after each session to find out how the animal did as far as they can observe and as and what they observe in future, and I can tell them how it felt from my end and what I did and all that stuff. So it's not like I'm telling the animal in English or
right.
asking them for permission in English, although permission is asked for.
Yeah,
It's energetic, it's in a mental state sort of thing. So that would be the biggest difference. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think that the rest of it is very similar in terms of what we do as practitioners. We're still channeling the energy to the being, be it human or animal, and the energy is still going where it needs to go and doing what it needs to do.
Hmm.
So I think in that respect, it's a very similar process. Just the mechanisms are different. So,
Yes. One other thing I will add is the way in which now every Reiki practitioner works different.
oh, I think Reagan froze. She's frozen. Well, what Regan was probably going to say is we all work differently um, to achieve a similar end. So hopefully she's coming back. Oh no. Okay, I will continue on with a question from Priya that we had. Um, Priya was curious about how distance Reiki works. And she finds it hard to believe you can send energy without being physically present. Well, I know that it's a hard thing for people to get their head wrapped around, but as I said before, everything has energy, uh, and now Regan has disappeared. Um, and in terms of distance Reiki, the it's kind of as if you're sending uh, you're sending that energy to someone like you do when you are thinking positively about someone. I mean, if you're sending somebody good thoughts, that's a similar kind of concept. And with Reiki practitioner, that's just it's a bit more of a focused thing. It's a bit more of a um, uh, intense than kind of just sending positive thoughts. Um, So, like a broadcast like this, we're broadcasting, we're sending out energy, and you're receiving it on the other end. We're not physically in the same room. Even Regan and I aren't in the same room, but we can still make a connection and we can still have that exchange. And that's how the distance Reiki works, is that you're still making a connection with somebody, even though they're not actually there. Um, all of us right now have people that we can't see that we're making connections with, that we're thinking about. So even if we're not speaking to them directly, we're still thinking about them and still, you know, getting in touch with them. So hopefully that answers your question, Priya. Uh, Sarah had a question about human distance Reiki and animal distance Reiki about creating an optimal environment for distance Reiki sections. I will jump into the human distance Reiki session environment. Regan is trying to reconnect. I have no idea if this is still going live. So I'm just going to keep talking. I can't see anybody's comments. So if you are making comments, I can't see that. um, uh, yes, optimal environment. So for distance Reiki with humans, I ideally tell people that you want to be someplace where you're comfortable. Um, it's you want to treat it like a meditation, so that you're somewhere comfortable, quiet, that somewhere you can turn things off and relax and focus on yourself, focus on what you're doing, your breathing, that kind of idea. Um, and I do try before a session to connect with a person physically. So either via phone or text if I know them and if we know each other, so that we know we're both in the same place at the same time in terms of we're both ready to start, we're both comfortable, we're both ready to go. And if it's somebody I have never met before, I prefer to have a video chat with them at least for a little bit beforehand, so that we can get a sense of each other and connect a little bit on that level before we actually do a treatment. Um, this seems a little weird to keep doing this, but I will go. And if Regan comes back, I will get her to talk about the animal stuff. Um, I don't, nope, I don't have my little iPad. So, um, uh, okay, I'm just looking over the questions. The next one is all about animals. Um, Diana has a question about is there anything that Reiki can't help in humans or animals? And is there an immediate benefit? And how many treatments do you need? Are there negative side effects? All of that scope of things. So, some people will feel an immediate benefit from a session. And usually you will have some kind of reaction to a session. Um, every session, certainly for me, when I was doing sessions before I did my training, every session was different. My reaction, my what I took away from it, everything was different. Different experiences every time. Sometimes it was a physical reaction, sometimes it was a mental release. Um, oh, I think Regan is back.
Hello. My
I
apologies.
think that we were still going live, so I just kept talking and answering questions.
Oh, wow, great. Thank you. Where did you leave off at?
Well, I just jumped down to some of Diane's stuff
Oh,
about the
great.
benefits, and because I skipped over Rob because most of that was animal stuff.
Right.
So let me just kind of wrap up with the benefits and the negative side and all that kind of fun stuff from
Okay.
Diane's, and then we can go back to the animal side of things with you.
Terrific. All right. I'll just jump back to what I was saying about gourd there way back when. Okay, so go
Yeah,
ahead.
exactly. Um, so yeah, there you will have a reaction to a session generally of some sort, and I'm not sure that there's anything Reiki can't help. I think it can help anything. I think it depends on the person and how open they are to it. Um, I think that in terms of negative effects, it's not so much that there's a negative side effect, it's that sometimes it opens up a lot of emotional stuff, especially for humans. There are people that I have told that I don't think they should do a treatment, a Reiki treatment, because um, for me, Reiki is a great, I love Reiki, I love doing it, but it is a tool in our personal toolbox kind of thing of self care. It's not the be all and end all. It's not the only thing that will fix something. So there are some people that I know that I have said, no, I don't think you should do this because I know they don't have enough of an other support system.
They
To,
sort of might need a therapist first kind of thing.
well, or they might need to have a therapist or some other support system that is in place at the same time. And you don't want to open those floodgates without them having that support system in place.
Right.
So I have counseled some people to not go ahead with the session until they are in a better place with their support system, because it isn't going to fix everything overnight. As Diane asked, how many treatments? One, few, ad infinitum. It could be any of those, and it really depends on the person. I have clients that do it when they get stressed and crazed. I have clients that do it just every once in a while because it makes them feel good. And they're not trying to necessarily fix anything. They're just adding it to their self-care routine, once every month or two. I have clients that will come every week, and we will do a session every week for several months and then not do anything again for a while, right? It really, again, is very individualized in terms of who and what the goal is for what you're doing. So,
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you want to jump back into some of the gourd stuff, I did talk about Priya's question
Oh, yes.
a little bit. We can talk a little bit more about that if you want. And then
Sure.
I talked about Sarah's question about the optimal environment for a human distance Reiki, but not
Okay, I gotcha. All right, so Gord was asking if there are differences in what they would be between a Reiki session for pets and a Reiki session for humans. And the other thing I was going to mention, besides communicating with the pet parent instead of the pet themselves, obviously, and where you would speak directly with your human client, Heather. The other thing is that, especially in person, it's about creating a space in which they may choose to partake of as much or as little Reiki as they want, whether or not they enter the space physically or just let it be drawn, or draw it to them. That's what allows for them to consent and permission and whatnot. And the same thing goes for distance Reiki too, although I'm more likely to use hand positions with the distance Reiki session because I can start by creating the space, getting permission. I feel the flow, then I go ahead with hand positions, as if the dog or cat was in front of me. And sometimes I place crystals and things like that too. But if it were in person, it would be more of just me creating an energy bubble, as it were, for them to either physically move into with me or partake of from a distance or completely ignore. It's up to them entirely. So that would be those two things would be the biggest differences between animal and human Reiki. Otherwise, and actually one other thing I just thought of is that we were talking about the 7 major chakras for humans. There are 8 major chakras for animals. Their brachial chakra, right, like at their shoulder blades, is the animal-human bond, as well as their bond with other beings. And it also is the center and connects to all their other chakras. So, okay, I lied. 3. Those are the 3 major differences. All right. And so when you were talking about Priya's question, how distance Reiki works and how she finds it difficult to believe that you can send energy without being physically present, would you mind just bringing me up to speed on what you said?
I talked about how certainly even like right now, where we can't see people, we're still thinking about people, we're still sending good wishes to people, we're still trying to connect electronically and doing something even like this, where we're not in the same space, we're not in the same room, even you and I aren't in the same room, but we can still make a connection, we can still have that, send that energy back and forth to each other this way. And that's kind of, with the distance Reiki, it is that kind of broadcast
a signal.
Is that and it is that kind of, we do it all the time. We think positively about somebody. We send them good wishes.
Yes, power of prayer and whatnot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. That is how energy signals work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
or at least these kinds of healing energy signals. Of
yeah,
course, like a broadcast signal is energy too.
yeah.
It works a little bit differently, but basically the same thing.
Yeah.
It really, yeah, it really does not matter um, whether you have distance Reiki or actually, now I just wanted to go into that other question that I got from Mary Beth, or more that she's a Reiki practitioner herself. So
Mhm.
she just wanted to make sure was covered when I was asking people for questions and comments and whatnot ahead of time for us to speak about today. She just wanted us to speak about how Reiki is just as effective sent through distance as it is in person, and how it works with that energy, which we just spoke of. And yeah, basically, she like I am often concerned about how a lot of people feel they want it in person because it's more tangible that way for them.
Right.
Five senses tangible. You feel like yeah, the physical senses and whatnot are activated more so than like an ethereal sort of distance thing,
Exactly.
but it is just as effective.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
And
that
for me, I mean, for the way I practice, and again, it's different from each practitioner, but I practice a hands-off method of Reiki.
even in person.
Yeah, even in person. Some
Hmm.
people are taught hands-on, some people are taught hands-off. And I was taught hands-off, and I've tried both, and I prefer hands-off.
Right. Does that
And
mean hovering? Does that mean hovering?
yeah,
Yeah,
so yeah, you're kind of like, 2 inches, kind of like that.
yeah, in the energy field, but not on the physical body.
Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
feeling the energy between, I can feel that between my hand and the person and the flow between them. So,
Yes.
whereas I find that if I'm physically touching somebody, I don't feel the same. I mean, I know it's flowing, but I don't have the same kind of feel and the same kind of feedback. I
Right.
don't get the same kind of understanding of what's happening if I'm doing a physical touch. So,
Cool. Cool.
yeah,
And for me, I prefer distance Reiki, like full on distance Reiki for animals. And this we talked about in our interview as well, our second interview, I think, or possibly
yeah,
both of them. Um, Basically, this is because I am much less distracted by the human parent
yeah,
or other beings that may be in the household if I were there in person trying to give Reiki to an animal. And feelings of like being watched, and monitored and things like it can be very
yeah, yeah,
distracting.
exactly.
And I want my focus to be nice and laser,
Yeah,
strictly
yeah,
on the animal that I'm treating.
yeah,
So distance Reiki works a lot better than that. I can control my own environment much better. And even if things do happen, Raxel barks or something, I'm much more used to that and able to dismiss it. A,
yes,
a thought comes in, I can get rid of it faster and just
yeah,
go back to focusing. So yeah, I think I'm a better distance practitioner than in person myself.
right,
So
right.
yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah.
good.
All right. And you said, as far as Sarah, creating an optimal environment when the animal is having a distance Reiki session. So you spoke to
I
creating
suppose
that for
creating
the
the
human.
environment in the human, how I like to make the connection first with somebody, and that it's basically you're treating it like a meditation, and
Yeah.
that you're trying to, they should be in a comfortable place, quiet, disconnected from things, all that kind of fun stuff.
Yes.
But I left the animal side to you. I mean, I know from that when we spoke kind of some of the basics, but I figured I would let you explain that when you got back.
Yeah, thank you. No problem. And yeah, it is very similar. I create an atmosphere for myself, sometimes music, spa music, because it particularly helps with focus and things like that, and my rituals. And of course, as you'd mentioned beforehand, yes, I like to talk to the pet parent.
Yeah,
Um, Preferably, if possible, video like this, because right now with COVID-19, it's not like I can meet them in person right just now.
yeah,
In the future times, perhaps like a quick coffee or something might be doable sometimes. But generally, a quick Zoom call or something, a Facebook call, whatever.
yeah, me
Uh,
too.
yeah, to chat about what they want, what's wrong with their animal, or that they feel is, and what they hope to get out of the session, and I can explain how it works and get that opportunity. And also, I have them fill out a case study form. Yeah,
Yes,
so I have
great.
some information as well. And yeah, so oh yes, and of course, because it's distance Reiki, especially right now, I need a photo of the animal. That's how I make my initial connection before I start into symbols, rituals, and creating the space. I have a good look at the animal right into their eyes from the picture, and because I'm a very visual person, and that's something that I'm trained to do anyway. But it's most helpful. It happens to work very well for me.
Yeah, with distance Reiki, I mean, as I said in my little bit, if it's somebody I don't know, I like to do a video connection. But yes, you need to have some kind of image of that person so that you know who it is that you're sending things to. So
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay, so I think that answers that, and then I have some questions from Rob.
yeah.
We both know Rob actually, but it's
Oh,
Rob
do we?
Rob Downs. Yeah. Oh, I just
Oh,
put his
yeah.
name out all over the internet. That's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. uh,
Okay.
so he said he was curious about the history of animal Reiki, and asked if we could give some detail about when it started and who started it, and was it the same something that came about the same way as human Reiki? And part of that answer is yes. Basically, human Reiki was the start of Reiki, but it applies to all beings.
Yeah.
And so there's no way I can know myself when animal Reiki specifically started. All I can really reference, I'm just looking in some of my texts here from Reiki 1 and Reiki 2, because I'm not great at remembering anything in history. Okay, so oh, I'm on the wrong page there. That's great. Okay, there. Human Reiki, well, it's basically it's ancient, it's energy, so it's always something that's been accessible. But originally from Tibet, basically it says here Reiki was rediscovered, as we say, by a Japanese monk named Dr. Yusui
Yeah.
in the late 19th century. So that's when human Reiki, as we know it, somewhat modified. There are different styles, and of course,
The North American version,
there's
basically. Yeah.
we're more aware of the North American version for obvious reasons. It's
Yeah.
where we were trained,
Yeah.
somewhat anyway. I got a little UK training, but the Western world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so there, the history of Reiki could be in an entire live for an hour all by itself or more. So I'm not
Yes.
going to get into it any further than that. But basically, as soon as Reiki was a thing for humans, it automatically meant it was a thing for possibly for animals. Now, I looked in my textbook for my Reiki level 2 course, just to give you a bit of an idea, maybe when things started to get going with animal Reiki. Kathleen Prasad is the person who runs, let me see, she co-founded Shelter Animal Reiki Association, and she also started Reiki herself. Back, it looks like in 1995 is when she started with energetic practices. In 1998, she learned Reiki level 1, and was attuned to Reiki level 2 in 1999. Animals have always been a part of her life, and she started working with them pretty much as soon as she was herself attuned, at least by Reiki level 2, but probably Reiki level 1 as well. Yeah, in 2005, she got together with a sanctuary hospice for senior and special needs animals and started to train those staff and volunteers in animal Reiki. So certainly since the late 90s, early 2000s, people, and she's in California, have been teaching and attuning people for animal Reiki um, for those purposes and creating courses and whatnot, at least since then. So it's become, you know, popular, if you will, starting
Yeah.
then. But I still feel like it's got lots of ground, you know, still to
Yeah.
cover. It,
And
it's
I think, as you say, it's been around longer
yes,
than
than
that,
that.
right? Like it's and that's one of those things we talk a lot about Reiki in terms of how we do treatments on beings,
Yes.
human or animal.
Mhm.
But you can use Reiki for a number of other things
This
too.
is true.
Uh,
Yes.
and that again has been around since Reiki was originally developed and taught and passed along, right?
Mhm.
You can use Reiki to clear energy from a room,
Yep.
and that kind of thing. So, or from your house or from
You
your
can
your
you can
garden.
yeah, you can channel Reiki to your water and have a like and sort of take it that way internally. This extra sort of
Exactly. So
energetically purified water. Yeah.
yeah, so I think in terms of the kind of quote unquote history, I think that it's probably been around for a long time in terms of the animal side of it. It just hasn't been formalized until a little bit more recently.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And there's still things missing. There is some regulation. You know, there are Reiki societies, etc. Unions, if you will, not really, but that
now,
do the
the
regulation that they can.
Canadian Federations, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I belong to the Canadian Reiki Association. So
right.
yeah, that's a Canadian national organization, so
Yeah.
of practitioners.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
but it's not, say, a governmental agency or something
no,
like that regulates, like our health industry,
yeah,
traditional medical health industry, food consumption, things like that. So there's it's still in development, and therefore for animals, you can just
right,
it's even a little more behind as far as that goes,
yeah,
veterinarily speaking, and so forth.
yes, yeah, exactly.
Oh, and now he asked a lot of questions. Do you have to be trained in animal Reiki to attempt it? And is it all at all helpful for an amateur to attempt doing themselves? Now, as far as an amateur you need to be attuned to Reiki in order to give Reiki,
Yeah,
including to yourself. You need to be attuned to Reiki level 1, and then you can start giving yourself treatments. I mean, you can still there's no harm in attempting energy work, as far as I know, on yourself. Even if you're not attuned, you're not going to do anything.
as I said, we all send out positive energy, right?
Yeah,
Or negative
exactly.
energy if we so choose. But
Mhm.
we all have the capability of sending out positive energy. Reiki practitioners are just a much more focused channel of it,
Yes,
and much more focused conduit of it, and much more intense. So it's not that you can't send out positive energy, but you're just not going to be sending out Reiki if you're not attuned to it,
that's
right?
right. Yeah,
So
yeah.
now
So,
I'm gonna jump in and I'm gonna answer
yeah.
your second part of that.
Mhm.
Is it helpful for an amateur to attempt or to learn, if somebody's not trained in animal Reiki? Um,
Yes.
again, I don't think it's going to cause any issues if I started to do an animal treatment,
Right.
but most practitioners that I know, once you've done some training, if you're an ethical practitioner,
Mhm.
you're not going to attempt to do something that you haven't had training for.
That's right.
So yes, while I will send out all the positive vibes in the world to lots of animals because I love them, I would not actually attempt to do
Right.
a Reiki treatment on an animal because
Unless you took the training to
yeah,
in animal
exactly.
Reiki.
That's
Yeah.
not what I do. That's not what I'm trained for. At some point, I'd like to do that training, and it hasn't fallen into my wheelhouse at this point in time. It hasn't worked out for me to do the training and have that kind of time and energy to do that. Um, and I wouldn't do a treatment on an animal for that reason because I know that there are certain things that you need to learn because I've learned those about human side of things.
Yeah.
I know there's things that need to be learned So again, yeah, I'm not going to necessarily hurt the animal, but it's not something I would attempt to do as a practitioner, because it's not my training, it's not my background. So
And my personal recommendation, as far as treating your own pets goes, is to at least have Reiki level 1. Right,
yeah,
that's enough. Reiki level 1 for animals.
animal,
Yeah, I mean it also covers humans too. But there'll be some tidbits about animals specifically, and then you can treat your own. It's just that you're not going to be able to do distance Reiki. You need to be attuned to Reiki level 2 for that, and you're also not going to be doing other people's animals and or charging money or anything like that.
right?
So
So
that's yeah. But it's a good way to start if you're interested in furthering Reiki studies, starting with level 1 and practicing on yourself and or your own animals. It's yeah. I mean, you need to practice, right,
yes,
to move on. So
yeah,
that's always a good thing. Um, yeah. So to be successful, I'd say yeah. That's the
yeah.
best way to tackle Reiki. Um, he asks, are there specific signs in one's animal that would suggest that they would benefit from Reiki, or does it vary from animal to animal? Um, and we can answer this human to human too, Heather. As far like, I mean, Reiki, I would assume would benefit everyone in general, at least in a generalized way. But every person's going to have different imbalances and different needs.
Yeah,
Correct?
yeah, I believe so. And again, it as I said earlier, it's part of your toolkit, right? And it's so maybe at that particular point in time, Reiki is something that will benefit you, and maybe that level of energy transfer and that level of meditation and whatnot will be beneficial for you. But maybe there are other things that would be more beneficial. Maybe it is something that you want to look at, acupuncture. Maybe it's something that you need to look at, a more strictly Western medicine. Like, maybe, it's not to say that you can't do both, and not to say that you can't have multiple things happening,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not always just one thing.
Yeah. And it's also not always helpful to throw everything in your toolkit at something at once
Yeah,
either. Yeah,
exactly.
it can be overwhelming, and it can also be difficult to track what's working and what's not
Right.
when you do that. So sometimes maybe it's you pick an order. Maybe you start with acupuncture. Maybe you start with therapy, and then add Reiki.
Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly.
it it's an excellent complementary
Yeah.
therapy. I don't
Or
even.
you do a Reiki session and decide that it's not having enough impact, or it's not, kind of enough of what you want, what you need, and maybe you need to look at a different direction.
Yeah.
Or you do a session and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. you know,
Yeah, yeah, and
it,
that is what I
you know,
need.
sometimes it's just a matter of, you see what's out there and you see what works for you at that particular point in time in your life. So
And so, therefore, what we've just said about humans does apply to animals. It
yeah,
basically, if you're seeing signs of anything wrong in your animal's behavior, emotions, physically, yes, Reiki can benefit these things. And it's just to what extent are they going to benefit? You
yeah,
kind of have to find out, just the same as a human would. And we've talked about this before, Heather, but we both tend to lean towards emotional, spiritual, somewhat mental issues being particularly uh,
yeah,
what Reiki really works well for. I mean, not to say that physical things don't, especially since physical issues like pain definitely elicit emotional reactions, and traumas and things like that elicit an emotional thing. So Reiki would be helping perhaps the physical as well as the emotional in those cases. But I think when we talked in our other conversations, that's how we felt Reiki personally was
yeah.
most beneficial.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Certainly in
yes.
my experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that is and it's also attached to many other issues for animals is anxiety. That's something that I feel like Reiki is really good for.
Yeah.
Massage therapy too, definitely, but Reiki on that sort of emotional, behavioral, energetic level is very good for anxiety, whether it's based in fear and or aggression, or coupled with these things of past trauma. Yeah, there, there's anxiety is always paired with other things, depression,
Yeah.
but they all, I think, can benefit from a Reiki recalibration, as it were.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Um, so basically, yes, it does vary from animal to animal for sure what their needs are. And the nice thing about Reiki is, though, that the healing goes exactly where it's needed. Even if I have a preconceived idea, or the owner, pet parent,
Yeah.
has a preconceived idea, the Reiki is going to go exactly where it's needed. So even
Yeah.
if we're
We
wrong,
very much try when you're doing a treatment as a practitioner to not have
yeah,
that notion of I'm going in, I'm doing this to help with X,
hmm,
right? Because maybe they're feeling pain and physical pain somewhere, but that physical pain is emotionally generated.
yeah,
Maybe I mean, I've talked about this before and other things, that sometimes you're feeling a pain in your hip, but actually the problem is your knee, like but the pain is moves because that's the way the body works, right?
yeah,
So, and it's the same thing emotionally. And so sometimes you feel one thing, or you know, you're experiencing one thing, but the underlying issue is something else.
yes,
And the Reiki will go to where it needs to go. And you try to go in with that kind of open slate of, all I'm doing is focusing the energy to
yeah,
that person and letting the energy do what it needs to do,
yeah,
and letting it go where it needs to go. And that also depends on the other person being open to that as well.
yeah.
And they have to, I mean, it's a little easier with animals. They tend to be a little more open
They
to all,
are.
but with humans, it needs, they you kind of need to find a way to step back from yourself and let that energy kind of flow through you and do what it needs to do. And sometimes that can bring up a lot of stuff. And sometimes that's why I say sometimes it's like, you need to make sure that you've got that support system in place, because maybe this is going to bring up a lot of emotional stuff that you aren't prepared to deal with. So,
Absolutely. And now I do like to have a bit of knowledge about what the pet parent thinks the animal is having trouble with
yeah,
experiencing, and keep it in mind.
yeah,
But I just had a session today, actually, where I was going along expecting to do a particular thing, which I did do, but I was inspired, I like to say,
yeah,
to add extra, or to spend extra time in another chakra,
yes,
because just a feeling. And I always feel like the animals are teaching me so much, even though they're the clients.
yeah.
They're teaching me on this, on my particular journey too. So
Oh, yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And they're so much more experienced. This is their natural language. I had talked about earlier about how animal communication, Reiki creates a space where that can happen, and some messages, whether they come in the form of feelings or images, or just knowing,
yeah,
um, that Reiki is a particularly good atmosphere for that, to allow that to happen. And yeah, they that is their natural language, and they're already good at Reiki
yeah,
and energy stuff. And
yeah,
so
exactly.
working with them is always going to be a teaching experience for me too. Not that it isn't with humans too, because I assume, Heather,
So
you get
it's
lots of lessons all the time too.
all the time, for sure, of
Yeah.
course. But yeah, animals are much more receptive to taking the energy. So
Yes. Yeah.
there's
This is.
there's a lot less resistance. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's see now. Oh yes. This is a similar question that you answered for Diane. How often would you suggest having Reiki sessions? Is it based on the level of tension in an animal? Can you overdo it? And I don't really think you can overdo it with animals. I mean, they have the option always. I always
I
make
was
sure
gonna
that
say that.
they can stop.
Yeah,
So they're not going to let you do too much. And if yeah, especially when you're creating again in person that bubble, they're in complete control of how much they're taking or not. So I don't think you can overdo it. It does vary to animal. What I might suggest, like like Rob says, the level of tension, yeah, that would determine like maybe how often, whether it's every few days or once a week or vary every once in a while kind of thing. And I like to work with threes, so I like to do just generalizing here.
yeah,
3 appointments, sort of off the top. They're often a week apart.
right.
Generally speaking, that's been working well for me so far. And Heather, what did you say about this kind of
Yeah,
thing?
a lot of times, folks that are looking for a specific thing to fix, even if that's not the thing that needs to be fixed, if
Mm-hmm.
that's what they're looking for, often you'll start out with kind of a weekly session and see what happens. Sometimes more than once a week, but that really depends on the person and the situation.
Yeah.
I have a client right now that I'm doing distance Reiki with, and we've done, a couple of sessions a week, depending on what's going on. And that's because of what's happening right now, the
Oh,
COVID
okay.
situation, right? And
Okay.
the anxiety and that kind of thing. But this is somebody that I've treated for various, in various ways, Reiki, reflexology, da, 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 and aromatherapy. So I've known them for a long time. And, so we have a good sense of, is this a good thing? She knows when to ask, you know, and that kind of thing, right? And if my head isn't in it, then I can also say I can't do this tonight, right? Like that kind of thing, right?
Right.
So because that's also an issue too, right? Especially with things like this right now, right? If you as a practitioner are having a hard time coping, you can't treat somebody else, right? So if
Yeah.
you're having a bad day, you can't do a treatment. That's not fair to them, not fair to you. It's just not going to happen.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, I think again it really depends on why the treatment is happening, whether or not it's kind of very frequent or infrequent.
Yeah. And how intense what the experience that person is going through
Yeah,
is basically. Yeah. So the same thing would be for animals too. Yeah. It's
yeah,
just a bit of a judgment call that I make with each pet parent.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and his last question, how do
I'll,
you how do
I'll
you
jump in
convince
on this one.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll put the question out, which was, how do you convince someone who is unsure of the benefits of Reiki on their animal or themselves or
Human.
another human? Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Heather.
I don't think you can convince somebody. If someone is not interested in being convinced, then they won't be. If someone is curious and but isn't quite sure how it all works and isn't quite sure if it'll something that works, I will do small mini treatments, like usually half an hour session, 15 15 minutes to half an hour, depends on where I am and what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I will do, if somebody really is like, I don't know about this, I'm not sure, I'm not sure if this will work. We'll do a half hour session for free. We'll see how they feel, see if they take anything away from it, and if they want to come back. And for me, and it's like, if that works for you, then great. And if after the half hour you're like, I feel nothing, then it's not for you. So I don't think you can convince somebody of that.
Yeah, I know
Uh,
they're either open to it or they're not. Yeah.
with energy work, it's just not. It you're either interested in finding out about it, or it's something you've experienced on a different level, energy work on some other level, and you've decided you wanted to try Reiki.
Mhm.
But it's one of those things, I think, because the first session I went to was an info session. I just thought it was interesting, but I really had no concept of the fact that I thought it would actually work. But I ended up being the only person at the session because it was a snowstorm, and I ended up being, so I had a one-on-one session with the practitioner and woman who eventually became my teacher, and I had a 15-minute session where I was literally had an out of body experience, and it was the most amazing moment. And I was like, okay, I have to learn more about this.
Yeah.
And I was like, sign me up for a session right now. Like at that point, I wasn't taking classes. I just was like, sign me up for an hour-long session because I want to try this again.
Yeah.
And that's that to me, that's the best thing, right? I will do a demo on you and you see what happens. And if it works for you, then we'll do it again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I have opportunities for free Reiki sessions. At whether it's through other organizations, events, things like that,
yeah, yeah,
that come up too. So you're certainly able to figure out a way to get a free Reiki session, initial Reiki session with your pet, and you can of course come and find me and ask me if I would be willing to do that. It might be a little bit shorter. Their sessions are usually half an hour, so might be 20 minutes or something like that, but yeah, and so, sometimes I even just go ahead and do it half an hour, so whatever.
and it's just, you try it and you see what happens. And if somebody's, if they're that doubtful, it's like, well, then just, as I say, hop on my table and try it.
Yeah. At least there are many other treatment options available out there. So, it doesn't, Reiki is not the be all and end all. It doesn't all stop there. So there are other options to try. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just gonna go through here from what Diane said. What conditions in pets, dogs, cats respond best to Reiki? We had a bit of a chat about that already. I feel like anxiety issues, for the most part, but also physical issues that might that would respond with massage therapy, can also be helped by Reiki. So I would loosely say that, because there are many things that Reiki can help with. But the emotional side of things, behavioral, that kind of thing, is where I feel like it's best to, those are the best targets.
Yeah.
Will they benefit immediately? Sometimes. Sometimes, I have had, noticeable results right away. And sometimes, and more usually, it takes time. And even if you do notice some results, over time, over a few more sessions, you're going to notice more benefits, basically. Anything that Reiki can't help, we already discussed, correct? Like pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it can help in some way with anything. And how many treatments needed, we've talked about. And negative side effects, not really, again, because the animal is able to cut it off, as they need to. They usually don't, I found so far in my experience. They just, they'll just soak it up. But yeah.
And for me, as far as I'm concerned, it's not so much that it's a negative side effect per se for humans. It's just that sometimes it can open a session of emotional healing that needs to happen on a level that you need other support for, therapists or something. So sometimes it's a negative in that respect. So
yeah. So, and that sort of thing shouldn't happen with an animal, again, because I said they are able to just cut that off, and no nonsense there. And those are the questions that you sent to us. Thank you so much, everybody. And if you're watching the replay, please feel free to leave questions in the comments. I'm also going to post this on the website. You can, CoreyK9Massage.com. You can post your comments and questions there as well. And we will get back to you in writing as quickly as we can. And thank you so much for tuning in. And Heather, we'll leave your info in the comments as well, so people can find you. But sum yourself up again there, just for those watching.
It's LazyCatOils.com is the website. Info@LazyCatOils.com is the email. So to reach me, or you can find me on Facebook.
Yep,
I'm always there.
Yep. Same.